Hey everyone, I hope everybody's doing okay today. My name is Nolan Massarello, and today I'm going to be talking about Canto 28 from Dante's Inferno. And so, similar to last time, I wanted to start by discussing the background of the canto. Canto 28 takes place in the eighth circle of hell, specifically the ninth ring, or the ninth ditch, as they call it a couple times. And this particular canto addresses scandal and schism. So these are just sins that uh, essentially divide people um, politically, or they cause a division in a relationship of sorts. And so this is one of the more gruesome cantos. There's 41 different mentions of body parts being mutilated, just to give you an idea of what this one is like. And it's a lot less about character. It's more about the horrific imagery, so there's not very much character development. Um, it's it's mainly depicting the punishment for the sins of scandal and schism. And then there's a term, modo sozo, which translates to foul style. It's sort of a genre term for this type of verse, just because it's depiction of like the grotesque mutilations. So in this canto, there's a few different characters that we have. Actually, there's kind of a lot now that I'm looking at it, but Dante is obviously the main character. He's the writer of this story, and he's also the narrator that's traveling through hell. And then we have Virgil, who isn't really mentioned much in this canto, but he is present. And of course, he's Dante's assigned guide through hell. So the first people that Dante meets are Muhammad and his nephew Ali. And Muhammad is just a reference to the historical and religious founder of Islam. There's Bertrand de Born, who was a soldier and poet that accompanied King Richard I of England. And then there are three other named characters, Pierre, Curio, and Mosco. They're just other sinners in hell that Dante encounters, and they're all mutilated in different ways that represent their sins, and then they either give him warnings or just lament their decisions, which is also an ongoing theme of this canto, is characters that regret their decisions in life or are trying to give warning to people that are still alive. So there's very much an attachment to the world of the living in this canto. And then I just lumped all the other characters into the mutilated, and they're just all the other sinners of the eighth circle that are there for their sins of scandal and schism. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the sins being punished are schism and scandal. These are just ways of causing division between people, typically political or religious division. And so it's punished with mutilation in this circle of hell. Um, Demons mutilate the sinners, and then when their wounds heal, they're then reopened. So it's just the sadistic cycle of these sinners having to walk around, and then they're cut by the demons, and then once their wounds re-heal, they're back in line to get cut again. And Canto 28 begins by stating that the grotesqueness is pretty much impossible to describe. Dante says that there's like no battlefield on earth that could represent the amount of gore that is present in this circle of hell. And um, he references a specific battle in southern Italy. He doesn't actually name the battle, but he just references like a battle in southern Italy that was probably relevant at that time and probably notorious for being very gory. Probably something similar, I guess, to like Battle of the Bulge, or like any World War II battle that people are familiar with. So the carnage that was present in that, he claims, is like not even close to what the scene looks like in this circle of hell. So I divided this canto into six different events. The first one is when Dante is first entering this area of hell. He's very overwhelmed by the amount of blood and gore, and he says that he cannot describe it all, and that the worst battle on Earth would not fully paint the picture, I guess, of how much violence there is in this area. The second event is the actual mutilation. Dante sees the souls walking around in circles, and they're being cut by demons, and then those in line, their wounds are healing, and then they're being cut again by the time they're healed. The third event is Dante meeting Muhammad. He speaks with Muhammad and Muhammad's nephew Ali, and obviously Muhammad is representative of Islam, and uh, according to Dante, this is an example of schism. So, because Islam is not Christianity, it's a act of schism, and so Muhammad is here in hell, and he is split from his chin to his groin, it says, and Ali's face is cleaved in half. So both of them are being punished for this sin. The fourth event is when Dante meets Pierre da Medicina, and Pierre tells Dante to tell the living that there are two corrupt Italian politicians, which he names. And this kind of just shows the connection that a lot of the souls, especially in this area, have with the living world. The fifth event is when Dante meets a man named Mosca, who claims to be the root of the Tuscans people's punishment. Um, Basically, Dante sees that the punishment that this culture is receiving on Earth is linked to this one person named Mosca. And the sixth event is when Dante meets Bertrand, who is carrying his head around with him, similar to a lantern, as he describes it. And so one of the questions that we want to look at is why is this punishment particular for this type of sin? So why mutilation? And the idea behind this canto is that a body is obviously a unified structure, um, and scandal and schism, they destroy that unity, and they destroy whatever state or political body they are dividing. In the case of Muhammad, he's dividing religion. And so these sinners are being punished by having their own bodies torn apart so that they're no longer unified. Muhammad is cut from his chin to his groin. Ali's face is split open. Pierre's throat is slit. Curio's tongue is cut out. And Mosca's hands are cut off. And then Bertrand is decapitated. So this punishment seems to condemn multiplicity, and it's got this idea behind it that unity is good and division is bad. And there's another sort of message behind it from Dante, that one bad decision can ruin a society, which is in the case of Mosca, who claims that he is the reason that the Tuscan people are made to suffer. He believes that he essentially cursed all of their people um, because of his actions and the division that he caused. One of the interesting things about this canto that I noticed is that there's this sort of like meta narrative going on throughout. It starts with Dante almost like bragging about his talent. He says that he can do in verse what was done in prose, and it's a lot more difficult like to write with song and lyric and poetry, in the sense that you're limited to certain words and you have to rhyme and you only have so much space and you have to follow meter and melody or anything else like that. And with prose you have a lot more room because you can like stretch sentences to fully describe things. And so he says that he can do in verse what his predecessors did in prose, which is a bit precocious. And it was just kind of interesting to me. But Um, Dante also, it seems like he feels limited by male social stigmas and like a sense of honor. There's this one line where he says, I saw a thing that I should be afraid to tell with no more proof than my own self, except that I am reassured by conscience, that good companion, heartening a man beneath the breastplate of its purity. And I just thought that was interesting that this canto is specifically about sowing division between people and Dante being afraid of telling something that people won't believe, almost like a heretic in a way. And speaking of heretics, this canto is also interesting because Dante pre-condemns a man named Fra Dolcino, who about 7 years after the publication of Inferno was burned alive at the stake for being a heretic. And so it's just interesting that he was included in this canto, or at least he was mentioned. He's not actually a character, but his name is mentioned. And then another thing is the precision of the writing. There's so many descriptions of mutilations. As I said before, I believe 41 different body parts are mentioned as being mutilated. Um, and these descriptions are like almost like surgical the way they're described, and it's sort of perverted. But it's interesting how the punishment precisely matches with the sin, and there's this like moral clarity of if you do this sin, you get this punishment. Like Curio, who was an advisor to Julius Caesar, um, who sowed division. He has his tongue cut out and he's unable to speak. So, in conclusion, this canto is pretty interesting. It stands out from some of the others just because of its like how gruesome it is and just the way that it portrays Dante's ideology. He has these very strong views on unity versus multiplicity, and again, similar to the other canto I covered, there's more complexity to it, which is discussed in his book Paradise. But in this one, it seems that he views unity as ideal and multiplicity is bad, which is a bit problematic. Obviously, he portrays Islam very negatively in the sense that Muhammad is in hell for causing division, but a product of his time, I suppose. And then another interesting thing that was mentioned is contrapasso, which is the only time throughout the entirety of Inferno that this actual word is used, but it just kind of labels this idea that Dante obviously has been using throughout the work, which is that the punishment fits the crime. And as we've seen in every canto, um, there is a punishment and it lines up either literally or metaphorically with the sin that was committed. And in this case, it's very literal. Um, if you divide a body, then your body's divided. And so that's why there's a strong emphasis on the mutilation. Anyways, that's everything I've got. So thank you for listening.